All right, we are streaming live. Good afternoon, everybody. Chuck Holton here, coming to you from my studio in Panama. And I had a long night last night, I'll tell you about in just a minute. But first, 5 people were injured, including 2 critically, in a ramming attack that took place in France on an island called Oleron. And we're going to be talking about the increase or the continuing, very persistent radical Islamic terror around the globe, and what is the true threat of that as we look at, the U.S. military can only do so much. We've pulled many forces out of the Middle East and those wars, and now we're focusing more on drugs. We're going to talk about the calculus there, and so you're going to want to hear all that, so stay tuned. Please do me a favor and put in the chat where you're watching from. It tells the YouTube algorithm that more people need to see this content, and it helps to grow the channel. And I'm very interested to see where all these people are coming from. I'm blown away by how many people I ran into in Trinidad over this last week who watched the show. Now, if you're over the age of 65, you've probably noticed that the world has gone digital. Everything's online now, and somewhere out there's a hacker that's looking at your retirement account like it's his slush fund. You ever notice how every company that says, we value your privacy are the same ones that are selling your data to 12 different marketing firms and a Nigerian prince? Yeah, your personal info's not all that personal anymore. It's public property at this point. And that's why I use today's sponsor, Aura. I've been a paying customer of Aura for a long time. It's like having a digital bouncer for your online life, the kind that checks IDs and cracks his knuckles and doesn't let the riffraff get near your data. Aura keeps hackers and scammers and data brokers out of your business. It monitors your credit, it locks down your passwords, and it scans the dark web to tell you if some clown's trying to open a credit card in your name. Good thing to know. Best part is it's all in one app. It's a VPN, password manager, identity theft protection, all of it done. No stack of random subscriptions you forget to cancel. So if you're tired of being the internet's easiest mark, go to aura.com/hotzone. That's aura.com/hotzone for a 14-day free trial. And, do that because privacy shouldn't require an off-grid cabin and a tinfoil hat, if you know what I mean. All right. So again, that's aura.com/hotzone, and you get your 14-day free trial there, aura.com/hotzone. All right. Thank you to today's sponsor. We always appreciate companies that are willing to pay money to help us stay on the air and keep doing this. And we're also very grateful for all of the donations that are given by our viewers as well. We actually use those to help people around the globe. We're helping people right now in Armenia and in Colombia and in Panama and in South Africa and let's see, Israel. So we keep picking up more and more people that we help. Typically, I like to find single mothers because I have a real heart for single mothers. I hate it when men abdicate their responsibility to their families. And so we've been able to support a lot of single mothers around the world because of you. And I appreciate all of your generosity in doing that. Now, back to the people that were injured in this ramming attack. This is a place called Oleron in France. So I'm going to pull up a map here, and you can see Oleron is marked right there. It's a tourist island, mostly local tourists, I would say. And a guy ran down 9 people. He was a 35-year-old French national, but when he was arrested, he shouted Allahu Akbar. And so the French government is saying, we have not been able to determine a motive yet. May have something to do with drugs or alcohol or mental illness. And they just really dance around the idea of saying, yeah, this is another radical, Islamic jihadist who's just out to, kill people for the lulz. The concerning thing about this is so many of these people have been into the society that they're attacking, whether that's in France or other places in Europe or the United States, for many, many years. It's not like they just showed up from Syria and they immediately go on to start attacking people. They stay in America for a long time, and they should be assimilating and becoming Americans and valuing the things that we value, things like personal responsibility and freedom and things like that. But instead, they weaponize that freedom against us in the West in order to try to kill us and try to take us over. Now, I say all this as I'm sure that you're watching the, here, we'll take that map down. I'm sure that you're watching the elections that took place last night, and we just elected a radical Islamic guy as the mayor of the largest city in America, New York City. And the stuff that this guy is talking about, not only is he migrated to the United States, he is a diehard communist and also a radical Islamic terrorist who hates Israel and supports Hamas and Hezbollah and things like that. And look, I'm not being hyperbolic here. If you just listen to some of the things he says, it's downright terrifying. Take a listen to this short quote from Mamdani's victory speech last night in New York City.
Prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about.
There is no problem too large for government to solve and no problem too small for government to care about. The scary thing about that is what he's saying is that we need to make the government a whole lot bigger and more powerful. He believes that the government is the answer to all our problems. That is not America, folks. That's not an American ideal. The ideal that we'll just trust the government to take care of everything has gotten us to the place that we're in right now, with millions of people losing their SNAP benefits and their EBT cards and stuff with this government shutdown, because the government stepping in between charitable givers and people that are in need in order to sort of amalgamate power to itself means that when the government falls apart, which it's want to do, that it just means people that, look, when's the last time that the church just completely disintegrated? You can't really find I mean, you certainly can see where the church has lost influence, but that's partially because the government has been stepping into their territory, taking over the things that were once the domain of the church and taking it upon themselves in order to be able to buy votes from people. Well, Zohan Mamdani is trying to buy votes from people. He's saying the government will take care of you cradle to the grave. And that, my friends, is not only terrifying, it's evil. That is evil in political form right there. Because as many people have pointed out, the government that's big enough to give you everything you want is the government that's big enough to take everything you have. There is a large exodus of people fleeing New York City, and there will be even more. And these are not going to be the low income, low skilled workers. These are going to be the, the professionals, the millionaires, the people who pay all the taxes. You know that 20% of America pays more than 80% of the taxes in America. Well, that 20% is not going to stay in New York City under somebody like Mamdani. And so I'm tempted to say that Mamdani getting elected is probably a good thing in the long run, because when New York crumbles because of Mamdani's policies and the people who pay the taxes flee the state, well, you can be absolutely sure that Mamdani will just blame it on racism or something like that. But it's like willful blindness when it comes to the left, because if you look at companies, if you look at cities and states that are blue, that are run by Democrats, the quality of life is always worse, almost 100%, almost always worse than it is in places that are run by conservatives. So, if you compare like Idaho, clean air, clean water, beautiful views, nice people, lower prices, and compare that to Northern California or Portland or Seattle, where the prices are sky high, the crime is off the charts, drug use is out there in the open all along the streets. They literally have apps that will tell you where to be careful, where you're walking, so that you don't step in human excrement, things like that. And you just compare Boise, Idaho, which is actually a pretty liberal, it's more liberal than most of Idaho, but let's just compare a large city in Idaho to a large city in Washington or California or Oregon. You compare a fairly conservative state like Texas to your New York or Florida or Massachusetts or anywhere like that, Illinois. Yeah, let's just compare Texas to Illinois. You're almost every measure of quality of life is better in the random city in Texas than it is in a random city in Illinois. It just, like, there's so many proofs of this that it almost doesn't require arguing the point, because it's really, really hard for somebody to point out that any place that's run by leftists that's better than someplace that isn't. Now, the ironic thing about Mamdani winning the mayoral race in New York City, and I'm a war correspondent, so I don't typically comment on those kind of political things, except I'm going to get to why I wanted to comment on this. Number one is the irony of just 24 years ago, we said never forget. And we were, New York City itself was attacked by a gang of radical Islamic jihadists, and they killed a couple thousand people. And everybody went, never forget, never forget. Well, have we forgotten? Because that same city just voted in a guy who supports terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. Not to mention the fact that he wants to raise your taxes to 75%. That's out there as well. But and one of the things I want to talk about is this nexus, this connection that we're seeing more and more of, where you have radical jihadists who are teaming up with radical leftists in order to attack the idea of America. If at first glance, those two groups don't have that much in common. I mean, the radical left is all about gay rights, transgenderism, all this kind of stuff. They would absolutely celebrate if your kid decided that he wanted to, surgically remove his private parts and become a girl. They would absolutely celebrate that. And then you have these Islamic fundamentalists who would literally throw you off a building if you said that you were gay or transgender. So you'd say, like, well, how do these people keep showing up at the same place for the same reasons and calling for the same things? How do you have somebody like Mamdani, who is an Islamist, but also is pro LGBTQ plus minus ampersand exclamation point, whatever they call it today? So how do you put those two together? It's very concerning, without a doubt. And now, when it comes down to it, well, I'm going to get that. I'm going to get to that at the end. I want to talk more about this nexus. It's not theology that binds them together. It's targets. The radical left brings megaphones, money, and legitimacy to these protests, and Islamists bring grievance and threat and menace. They're the hard arm, the militant wing. And more these days, we're seeing a lot of crossover there. We're seeing a lot of violent leftists in America as well. But not only are the leftists sort of, they have the same goal. That what binds them together is not ideology. It's the targets. It's, they have shared antagonists. They hate the U.S.-led world order. They hate free market capitalism. They hate Israel and Zionism. Both camps justify extreme behavior toward an end of what they call liberation. And by combining forces, the Islamists are able to sort of launder their violence and reframe it as resistance. They put some Marxist rhetoric on their terror attacks, and now it's human rights, activism. So this isn't new historically. The 1979 Iranian Revolution began as a big tent, Islamists plus liberals, nationalists, and communists all together, united against the Shah of Iran. Then, once they got rid of the Shah, the Islamists consolidated power, killed off the communists, the liberals, the nationalists. They killed off all those people, and now all that's left is the Islamic jihadists. And this is where it gets concerning for America, because you might just say, well, hey, we're a diverse country, and if people want to vote for a Muslim, then let them go ahead and vote for a Muslim. Number one, I would say that part of the reason why people are feeling drawn to Islam, these are people who have no religion of their own, and they're certainly not looking to become Muslim, but they're drawn to the power that Islamists wield. They're drawn to the very black and white thinking that Islamists have. And you see this is very, very common in America and the West, is that as the West has moved away from the moral underpinnings of Christianity, the importance of the family, the sovereignty of the individual, the dignity of human life, things like that. They wanted to replace all that with a whole lot of nothing, just do whatever you want. The problem is a moral vacuum will get filled by something. And it's going to get filled by anything that is more forceful, more powerful, and more zealous than what they have currently. And what they have currently is this wishy-washy morass of do what you feel like doing, live your truth. There is no such thing as objective moral truth in the world. So truth is just like flavors of ice cream. Just pick which one you like. The problem with that is it's a very weak ideology. And so it's susceptible to stronger ideologies. And when Islam comes in, it brings a very forceful ideology that supplants the atheism, the secular humanism that has so taken hold in America today. Unfortunately, so many Christians have been brought up to believe that, that keeping your religion inside the church, inside the pews, in your, as one, I think it was Pete Buttigieg said one time that, we don't think your religious expression should be limited. It's just that it should only take place in your homes and hearts. And that literally is called limiting your religious expression. When you can only express your religious beliefs in your homes and in your hearts, meaning in your heads, and not with your mouth, not in the public square, well, that worldview is actually a giant moral vacuum, because it commits suicide on its face. It's a worldview that says it's true that there is no truth. It's like it just commits suicide. And so when you allow an ideology like that to take hold, then don't be surprised when a very zealous Marxist, Leninist, pro-Palestinian Islamic jihadist comes to power. Especially if he's talking about, hey, elect me and our government is going to take care of everything. We'll just take care of everything. So this is a very big concern. Even bigger is the fact that there are external forces outside of America, outside of the West, who are funding and facilitating this shift. They're giving to support candidates from the bottom up, and specifically from the bottom up. They're looking for, prosecutors, state's attorneys. They're looking for mayors and governors, and trying to get them elected, people who have this, this stronger ideology. So Mike says Rangers no longer lead the way. Why not? You're going to have to clarify that, buddy. Rangers lead the way is the motto of the U.S. Army Rangers. So I don't know what he's talking about. It's just amazing the weirdos, the weird things that you see in the comments on YouTube, isn't it? Isn't it just strange? I mean, we're talking about Iran, we're talking about Israel, we're talking about Venezuela, we're talking about wars and disasters happening around the world, and you get some jackwagon that comes on and says Rangers no longer lead the way. What? I'm sorry, what? Like, and these are drive-by shooters, right? I mean, they come swooping in and drop some ridiculous asinine comment in the chat, and then they just flit away. They're not willing to actually go toe to toe. People say, there are no retired Rangers. Let me just tell you, it's a whole lot easier to take the boy out of the Rangers than it is to take the Rangers out of the boy. And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I could do a whole podcast on that. So anyway, back to the topic at hand here. Look, in reality, folks, Islamic, look, the number of Islamic attacks that are identifiable as being motivated by radical jihadism, it is astounding. It's astounding. There have been more than 55,000 Islamic attacks across the globe in the last 20 years. 55,000 of them. In Europe, right now, this year, we're seeing approximately 2 jihadi terror attacks a month. And this has been going on for a long time. I mean, a long time. This is not the kind of thing that, oh, well, it's just a one-off. No, this is a big, big deal. And I just want to show you, if I can find it here, this Islamic terrorism. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to share this tab with you. And this is from Wikipedia. So, take it for, as you can imagine, Wikipedia is not, I mean, they're heavily influenced by the left. So it's probably worse than this. Okay. But if we pull this up and you look at this here, let's make that a little bigger. List of Islamic terror attacks. And it goes back to the 1980s. But I'm just going to scroll down there. There's 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 9, 10, 12, 13. Look at 2014. This is the rise of the Islamic State. Look at this. 2015, boom, just tons all across the globe. Look at that. Still keeps going. 2015 was a banner year for Islamic terrorism. 2016 went down a little bit, but still had record numbers. Look at that. These are all, every line on this is a jihadist attack. There's 2019, and I'm still scrolling. We get down here to 2025. Now, this is what I want to point out here. They have listed 1, 2, 3, 4. They have 4 Islamic jihadist attacks that are, on their list for this year. The first one was January 1st in New Orleans, the ramming attack where the guy drove his truck right down Bourbon Street in New Orleans and killed a bunch of people. There's a stabbing attack in Austria, a shooting attack, a terror attack that happened in India with guys from Pakistan and Lashkar-e-Taiba came across, and that's what precipitated the war, the short-lived war between India and Pakistan. And then they have the Mar Elias church attack, the Greek Orthodox church in Damascus, Syria, that killed 25 people and injured 63 others. So those are the only 4 that they have listed for this year. But what I want to point out, folks, is number one, this is just a representative sampling. What about the attacks on Christians, all the Christians that have been killed in Nigeria and Mali and across Africa? What about the almost daily attacks by radical Islamic terrorists in Israel? They don't list one of those, and they have those almost every day. There's other attacks that I just thought of off the top of my head that have happened in the United States, in Australia, in Germany, in Belgium, just all across the Western world that don't even show up on this list. So bottom line, this list says at least 48,000 Islamist terror attacks since 1979, causing the deaths of 210,000 people. The average Islamic attack results in 4.4 persons dying. Most common type of weapons used are explosives. The main target of these attacks is military, followed by civilians and police forces. The most affected countries are Islamic countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia. Okay. However, they're not counting anywhere near all of the attacks. I have reported on many attacks that took place, for example, in Sweden. And I want to show you this video that I shot in Sweden. I think it was like 2017, that talks about the Swedish government. They stopped reporting on when they report crime statistics, they don't report anything about the nationality, the race, or the religious affiliation of the people that foment these attacks. All right, and they stopped doing that in 2001, just to be politically correct. Take a listen.
You may have heard the recent controversy surrounding
Hang on. I got to take that other one down off. I got to remove that one. All right, let's try this.
some majority immigrant areas where police are as likely as not to be attacked if they enter have earned the name no-go zones. The Stockholm suburb of Rinkeby is one such neighborhood. 90% of the people living here are either migrants or children of migrants. Many come from lawless countries like Somalia and Syria, and some locals call the area Little Mogadishu. I've been to Mogadishu, and I can promise you after visiting Rinkeby, this is nothing like that. But that's not to say it isn't dangerous for people who are unwelcome here, namely the police and journalists. In 2016, several film crews reporting here were attacked.
And attack.
And a police arrest a few weeks ago led to riots like this. I went in low profile, filming only with my smartphone. It earned me some unfriendly stares and a few questions, but I wasn't attacked. Residents I spoke with said they much prefer this place to the countries they escaped from, but nobody would agree to be filmed. One thing I did notice was there were very few young women. That got me wondering how the young men here ever hope to date or get married. Reports from Sweden say there's been a spike in sexual assaults recently, but it's hard to say if this is migrant-related because Sweden stopped recording the nationality of people accused of crimes in 2001. And this leads to an even bigger question. Why?
Absolutely. That is the question right there. Why? Why did they stop reporting the nationality of crime suspects? The reason is, without a doubt, that they are afraid. They're afraid of angering the jihadists. You know, this is a group of people that has no sense of humor, right? I mean, when somebody draws a cartoon of Muhammad, these people riot and burn things. Okay, they take that very, very seriously. When somebody, I saw one time, there was, I think it was Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, who came out and said, Muslims just have no sense of humor. And the Muslims were so mad at that they went out and rioted and burned things down, threatened to kill people, and thereby proving his point, right? So this, when I was in Sweden, I talked to a bunch of people on the street, average Swedish people, women especially, and of course, that none of them would agree to be filmed because they said, "Look, I can lose my job and even go to jail if I am critical at all, even on social media or any place, of the migrants that are coming into Sweden." So they can't be critical of them whatsoever. But in private conversations where the cameras weren't running, they told me, "Look, we can't go running in the park anymore. We're afraid to take the subway by ourselves because we will get accosted. We will get assaulted. We will get sexually groped and things like that." So it is a huge problem that Europe just doesn't want to face. They just don't want to face it. And all of that violence that I just showed you in that video of Sweden, none of it made that list I showed you that lists 48,000 Islamic attacks. And look, this has a huge impact on our lives. Do you understand that? And it's not just in Sweden or Syria or someplace like that. It's actually right there in New York City, where Mamdani just took over back in 2017. I went to New York to report on a radical Islamic jihadist who ran a bunch of people over and killed like 9 people.
Underscores that the terrorist threat is real. As we defeat ISIS and affiliated groups abroad, we must be vigilant here in our country as they seek other ways to attack the homeland. Inspiring such attacks through hateful propaganda has always been part of ISIS and other terrorist strategy. This underscores the need for the most careful vetting of who enters our country.
I heard a noise, I looked behind me, and I saw 2 bikes and 2 people go flying. And, I went down and looked, checked it out. It was just chaos all down this bike path, bikes, and, people scattered, all destruction everywhere.
I've been across here like 12:30 walking across, and that could have happened to us too, because we're always on the street walking along. These people come into the country, and it's very hard for us to unite together. It's dangerous. I think they should have a really good check with them before they enter the country, and sometimes the good have to suffer for the bad.
Yeah, so you think that the plan to maybe say, let's take a pause on letting people come in until we can vet these people, you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, a pause for a while and check them and let the good one come.
Yeah, right. Find a way to do that,
Yes,
right?
a pause.
Now, you're an immigrant yourself.
Yes, I'm an immigrant. I'm from Jamaica, but they need to be more strict with the people that they let into the country.
Sure. Not a lot of terrorists from Jamaica.
No. We don't do that. We don't do that.
What happened yesterday was not okay. It will never be something any of us will just accept as inevitable. Since 9/11, we, again along with our partners at the local, state, and federal level, have disrupted or prevented 24 plots against New York City. Countless lives have been saved.
The president was asked a little bit earlier when he was meeting with his cabinet about the possibility of sending this terror suspect to the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and he said he is indeed open to that.
When you see what happened in New York and you hear that he wants an ISIS flag outside his hospital room and calls himself a soldier of the caliphate, what do you think of?
Well, first of all, obviously it sickens my heart to see that kind of thing. And when I hear people about where we're going to send him, should we send him to Gitmo? I say we skip Gitmo and send him straight to hell where he belongs.
So that's Jocko Willink in his typical straightforward style. But isn't it just astounding that that only happened a few years ago, and there have been other jihadi terror attacks in New York since, and now we are seeing half of New Yorkers vote for a guy who supports that kind of thing and has said so. I have a video of him somewhere talking about how we need to get more violent. We need to, not let this time go. We need to get more violent. So absolutely mind-boggling. Now, as much as radical Islamic terror is a problem that we need to deal with, and it is something that we should all be concerned about, I want to put it in some perspective for you, because in reality, the chances of you being killed by in a terror attack by a jihadi are pretty low. And if you look at the actual death toll in America, it's somewhere in the low double digits each year, people that are killed by radical Islamic terrorists. There are probably more people killed by transvestites at this point in America than are killed by jihadis. So we've done a fairly good job. Now, the other thing, we talk about 55,000 terror attacks that have taken place since 1979. That doesn't count the ones that have been thwarted. And there have been lots and lots of terror attacks that have been thwarted. So, it is a concern. No question, it is a concern. However, don't blow it out of proportion. Your chances of being killed by a jihad, like being killed in a terror attack in America, if you are going to be killed in a terror attack, it will likely be a jihadi terror attack, because we just don't see Christians or Jews or any other major people group, with the exception of incels, of transvestites and things like that, that are consistently engaging in violent acts that end up with people dying. So if you're going to die in a terror attack in the United States, it'll probably be at the hands of a jihadi. But again, if 12 or 15 people a year are dying in America due to those kinds of events, you've got 41,000 people a year dying in car accidents. You've got 75 or 80,000 people a year dying of drug overdoses. And what that says is that, and then you've got 500,000 people dying every year in America from complications from obesity. So you could make a case that Chick-fil-A is a bigger threat to your life than ISIS. That's not being facetious either. I mean, again, we are much, much, much more likely to kill ourselves because we can't stop shoving food in our face than we are to be killed by ISIS or Al-Qaeda or something like that. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepared and aware of the threat, but just keep it in perspective, folks. One of the things that I liked about what President Trump is doing right now by moving a large amount of our combat power into the Western Hemisphere to take on drug cartels, not just Venezuela, but drug cartels writ large. They just struck another boat off the Pacific coast. That means probably off of Mexico last night. So an AC-130 took that thing out. I like to see that because in reality, but per capita death rate, you are much more likely to be killed by a drug cartel because of, taking a medicine or a drug that is laced with fentanyl and kills you. You're much more likely to die that way than you are to die in a jihadi terror attack. So, again, if you're going to be worried about something, worry more about the food you're putting into your body and worry a little less about jihadi terrorism. It doesn't mean it's not a problem. And it doesn't take anything away from the irony that a bunch of Americans, millions of Americans, just voted for a couple of radical Islamic terrorists like Mamdani and this guy up in Minneapolis. So the reason why I wanted to do a whole podcast about this is not because radical Islamic terror is the most dangerous thing that we face. It's more because of this nexus that I talked about between the radical Islamic terrorists and the Marxist, Leninist communists. Why? Because communism has killed more people around the globe than every terror group and drug cartel put together by a huge order of magnitude. We're talking about probably 150 million people have died as a result of socialism or communism across the globe throughout history. 150 million people. And you'd have to work really hard to get there with just drug overdoses and, ramming attacks and things like that. So just keep that in mind. I mean, it is very concerning, and it's more concerning that this guy is a communist than it is that he's a Muslim by a long shot. Okay? All right, so I see a question here. I got to make that a little bigger. Mean old lady says, wrong. Islam has killed more people than all other ideologies in history. Well, I don't know where you're getting those numbers, but I would, from everything I can find, communism is far more deadly than radical Islamic terror, especially in modern it's like since World War II. Now, if you went back and look, all the people that were killed by Muslims, I mean, Islam has been around a lot longer than communism. So I'm not going to dispute your numbers there, because you could probably make a case if you went back to the year 670 AD when Islam was founded, and you added up all the people that have died because of Islam since then. Well, okay, yeah, it might be more than communism, but communism wasn't around. It's only been around in the last century or so. So there's the apples and oranges kind of thing there, right? Okay, so I want to get to our questions here. We're right at 45 minutes. Lord Peanut says, Chuck, in the UK, all the media is talking about the fact that the BBC was caught editing Trump's speech in 2021 and spread a huge lie around the world. Have you heard of it? Yes, I have. And they're not alone in that. The BBC obviously is terribly dishonest in the way that they edited that. And they actually changed the order of some of his words in his speech to make it look like he was encouraging people to have an insurrection against the government. When if you look at the speech without being edited, if you just look at it in its entirety, he was specifically asking people not to get violent, telling them to stay peaceful, peacefully protest, etc. So yeah, I mean, look, the BBC is funded by the British government, which means it's funded by the British people. Your taxes, if you live in Great Britain, go to fund this far left organization that is just nuclear levels of dishonesty. And unfortunately, the UK doesn't have citizens. They only have subjects. So you don't have much of a say in the matter. But I would say vote or vote with your feet, one or the other. And that's really what this is going to come down to in the United States, is that people are going to start voting with their feet. And it's just going to hasten this, having Mamdani take over in New York and having this skeleton looking weirdo that becomes a mayor of Minneapolis, literally went and won on the backs of Somali migrants, right? All this is going to do is it's going to hasten the balkanization of America, meaning people are going to continue moving away from pain points in their lives and moving to places where they can better make a living, et cetera, et cetera. And the people that are going to be left in these socialist hellholes are the people who are on the government dole. And again, socialism is great until they run out of other people's money. So that will happen. That is not a maybe. Lord Peanut says, do you think the Times Square Christmas tree will turn into a Ramadan bush? I don't know. Good question. It wouldn't surprise me if they just took the Christmas tree down at all and didn't have any Christmas tree. I mean, I certainly like celebrating Christmas, and I do have a Christmas tree. And I know I'm going to get all the internet weirdos who are like, no, that's a pagan symbol. Ah! Yeah, whatever. It is what you think it is. The Christmas tree, to me, represents God's creation, the beauty of winter, and it is hung very much with Christian symbols in my house. And so to me, I'm not one of those people that gets his undies in a wad because Christmas tree isn't mentioned in the Bible. I think that the Bible's pretty clear that, look, if it's a sin to you, then don't have one. It's not a sin to me, so I will have one. But you'll probably see Mamdani just say, hey, we're not going to have any of that in the public square. But you certainly will have the call to prayer 5 times a day from mosques in New York City. And that's a concern as well. Oh, have there been any, Shani says, have there been any investigations regarding Iran funding Mamdani's campaign? Not that I know of, but we certainly should have them. And it would not surprise me if Mamdani got money from George Soros. Actually, Trump has said they're going to do an investigation into the funding of some of these socialist and communist candidates, left-wing candidates. And they definitely need to do that. That's something that should be a priority for the FBI. Okay, do you think in America, Sherpa Man says, we'll have a Balkan-style war on American soil where there are 5-6 nation blocks in mainland America? Yeah, I've talked about the Balkanization of America for a long time, and I think that eventually it will come to that. This will start out like what we're seeing right now, people voting with their feet and going to jurisdictions that they agree more with their politics. And what that means is that America is going to get more and more divided. The leftists are going to get distilled down to their most disgusting form in places like California. And Texas is going to become more and more and more red. Florida is going to become a haven for people that want to get away from that kind of shenanigans. And that's going to continue to happen. And it could take a generation or two. I mean, it could take some time. But eventually, there's going to be a push to say, why do we even keep calling ourselves the United States of America? We're obviously not. And these socialist cesspools out in California and everything are a drain on our resources. And so why are my tax dollars, if I live in Texas, going to support some hoochie mama, some welfare queen in California? I don't agree with that. And so you're going to see a continued pulling apart. They call it the Great Divorce. There's some good books about that subject. If you want to read a novel series that kind of shows you what that might look like and is pretty realistic, it's called the Enemies, Foreign and Domestic series by my friend Matt Bracken. And it's a very well written series of novels that imagine what America will be like when it starts to balkanize like that. And Matt has written several great novels like that. So thank you for that question. Mike Force says, Rangers and SF are useless against communist infiltration of the U.S. Tabs mean nothing. The military does not serve to protect its citizens and Constitution. Okay. Sherpa Man says, do you think that there will be a shooting war similar to the Balkans war? And then, okay, yeah. So I spoke to that already. Cheryl Miller says, do you think that the results of last night's elections will have a positive impact on midterms as people watch the fallout or further spread socialism or communism? I think that it depends on what President Trump does. If President Trump continues to say that he's going to do things and then not do them, this taco meme, Trump always chickens out, I think people get pretty frustrated with that. There's a lot of things Trump has said that Americans have been like, yeah, let's do that. Like taking over Greenland, taking back the Panama Canal, all that kind of stuff. And yet we have not taken over Greenland. We're not even moving that direction. We're not taking over the Panama Canal. We're not making Canada the 51st state. We could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on for all the things that President Trump keeps saying that he's going to do and then not doing. And I think that sort of exhausts people on Trump, and by virtue of Trump, they get exhausted on the Republican Party. I think also if the Republican Party doesn't look, I'm not a real big fan of getting rid of the filibuster. For those of you that aren't in America, the filibuster is where the party that's not in power in America can force the Congress to have or Senate to have a super majority in the legislature in order to pass anything. And that's been sort of a safety mechanism to keep the party that's in power from passing all sorts of ridiculous stuff and really whiplashing America. Here's the problem with that. The next time the Democrats have an opportunity to do it, they're going to repeal the filibuster and they're going to push through everything they possibly can. So I can see the argument that we might as well just do it while the Republicans are in charge, because the Republicans really cannot get anything accomplished right now because they just get filibustered on everything. Everything. They can't even get President Trump's political appointments put in place. They can't get anything done. And the American people get pretty frustrated when they see our Congress critters not getting anything done. So I think if they got rid of the filibuster and then just went to town, just passing law after law after law after law that made America a better place, I think that would go a long way towards cementing Republicans' majority. But they've been very hesitant to do that. And disgusting to me to see what weenies our politicians turn out to be most of the time. Do you feel that way? I bet you do. I bet a lot of people feel that way. Okay. Cheryl also says, do you think the statistics of violence in USA will rise rapidly? Well, part of the problem, Cheryl, is that they stop reporting them, just like they did in Sweden. They stop. Many liberal jurisdictions in America have changed the way that they report violent crime, for example, or they've stopped enforcing the law for laws they don't like. And so, oh God, look, the drug problem is way down in Portland because by looking at the number of drug arrests that are made in Portland, they're down to almost nothing. So there's no more drug problem in Portland. Anybody that's been to Portland knows that there's a massive drug problem, open air drug markets in downtown Portland, people laying around stoned out of their minds on the street, et cetera, just simply because the police have stopped measuring those kinds of crimes. And that is not a way to lower crime in America, but that's the way the left likes to do it. Okay. Earl Gray says, didn't many police officers in New York say they would resign if Zohran Mamdani became mayor? I heard that some of them did. We'll see if they actually do that. You know, that's a big deal because you resign like that, you're giving up your pension, you're giving up your, in many cases, you're giving up your medical benefits, you're giving up your health care, your dental benefits, retirement plans, all sorts of stuff. And so you got to be pretty committed to, you know, just go walk out because you don't like who the mayor is. Becky says, do you think that certain celebratory events like Rockefeller Center at Christmas and New Year's Eve at Times Square will end with the election of Mamdani? No, I don't think so. I think they'll keep doing that, but they will certainly change. And I don't know if you've been to New York in the last 5 years, but I have. And New York is absolutely chock full of whack jobs and weirdos. I mean, they're just, there's plenty of normal people, but how normal can you be living in a city with 8 million people or something? I mean, it's just, that's too many people in too small an area. Look, when I had a farm and we had chickens, we learned that if you put too many chickens in the chicken coop, they will start to exhibit really bizarre behaviors. They'll start to eat one another. You'll see like homosexual behavior where the females and males will both be mounting other females and males, things like that. And it just comes down to overcrowding. Overcrowding, whether it's people or chickens, causes weird mental illnesses to rise a lot in those areas. And I think New York is a perfect example of that. There's a whole lot of people that are just absolute whack jobs in New York City. It's not hard to find one. You could, you swing a dead cat in New York City, you're going to find somebody who's pretty out there. You know, I just played a video the other day of a guy in New York City that was out there protesting against Israel, and he was saying that Muhammad was a trans lesbian, and he was serious. He was not joking. He's like, yes, Muhammad was definitely a trans lesbian. And you just go like, what kind of whack jobs? I mean, Holy smokes, these people. It's just amazing how that depravity that I talk about all the time, where you deny God and he turns you over to a depraved mind, how that depravity can just take root and just spread like a cancer in a place like New York. It's crazy. Thank you, Renee. Thank you for becoming a new member. Thank you, Christine, as well. Please pray for New York City. I'm a New Yorker and terrified of Mamdani. My cousin died in 9/11 in the South Tower. I tried to warn people and they didn't believe me. Well, that's the whole point of this podcast today, Christine, is, that the irony that New Yorkers have forgotten. They said they would never forget, but they have forgotten what happened on 9/11. Cheney says, can you please explain how the radical left and socialist pro-Islamist platforms can align? Well, again, they don't align on ideological grounds. They align because of they're both aiming at the same targets. And so it's a marriage of convenience between them. And the problem that we've seen all across the globe is that whenever Islam makes a marriage of convenience with people they don't necessarily agree with, once they've defeated their common enemy, then the Islamists will turn on the useful idiots that they've been using to help defeat the common enemy. And so I think that in the long run, this ends up going really poorly for the left. Patrick Wickersham says, wouldn't you agree life has many choices, but eternity just has two? All our choices come down to two. I would agree. Absolutely. And again, look, I've mentioned this quite a bit, and so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I don't understand what it is that people just can't accept about, don't you want to live in a country where people put other people ahead of themselves, where people give to one another when they're in need, where people, don't insist on themselves being the end all and be all of their own existence. People who say, I should try to do the most loving thing possible at every given moment. What's so bad about that, people? That's Christianity for you. Christianity means putting other people ahead of yourself. It means giving of the blessings that you have. It means being a blessing to other people and doing the most loving thing possible for them. Now, that's highly simplified, but that's really what Christianity comes down to. And it's not, we don't do this because we're trying to earn our way to heaven. You don't have to be a good person in order to get to heaven. You have to be a redeemed person. You have to have your sins paid for by the Most High God. And one of the things about Islam, and one of the reasons why we see so much violence coming out of Islam, is because violence is their only sure way to heaven. The only way you can be, the Quran says that when you get to heaven, Allah will weigh your good deeds against your bad deeds. And if your bad deeds outnumber your good deeds, you're cooked, man. You're done. But the only way that you can be sure of getting into heaven is to die fighting the infidel, is to die in holy jihad. And so these people, because their religion is all about dying the right way, they have to go out and run people over in the street or stab people or shoot people or whatever. They have to do that. That's the only way they can be sure. Now, by contrast, for Christians, for us, it's not about dying the right way because all the dying has already been done for us. It's about living the right way in gratitude for the dying that's been done for us by Christ on the cross. And so I don't go be charitable to people. I don't support single mothers, and I don't give to the needy, and I don't try to be loving to the people around me, and I don't take responsibility for my actions and for providing for my family and all that sort of thing. I don't do all of that to try to earn my way to heaven. I do all of that out of a profound sense of gratitude because I'm already going to heaven. I didn't have to do anything for it. I just had to accept the free gift of God that he gave me in his son, Jesus Christ, who paid the price, which is death, for all of my sin and all of your sin. So that's the difference between Christianity and Islam. I don't understand how people would not say, we demand a Christian as our leader. If we get two guys that are the same in every way and one's a Christian, one's not, we'll always take the Christian because he answers to a power above himself. A guy who's not a Christian, his own self, his own persona is the end all and be all of his existence. And that doesn't lead to good things over time. So thank you for that, Patrick. Keith Cindy Panama says, winter, we moved away to Panama to get away from winter. Yes, same here. My wife hates winter. And so it makes Connie much happier to live in a place where there's sun all the time. And that's why we moved here. Cheryl Miller says, if Mamdani is investigated and found to be funded by designated terrorist groups, can he be taken out of the mayoral office legally? That would be a very, very difficult thing to do. Once he's in power, it's going to be really hard to get him out, even if there's compelling reason to do so. Dylan H says, voting with my feet at the start of 2026. Adios, New Mexico, since we are two separate countries in the U.S. Do you think it's going to be a slow burn civil war? Yes, I do. It's the kind of thing that the collapse of empires goes very, very slowly at first until it doesn't. And then it goes very, very quickly. Denia says, Chuck, what do you think we Christians should do now or go from here? Well, get your kids out of the public school. I mean, really, because the left relies on you having children and then turning your children into good little liberals at the public school because they themselves don't believe in having children. They don't have very many children at all. And if we just have as many kids as we can and as we can afford, and then homeschool them, keep them out of the public schools and pour our own worldview into them and inculcate within them the sense of personal responsibility and individual sovereignty and dignity for human life and all those things that we say are important, we will take back America politically because liberals don't have kids. But we're not having near enough kids as conservatives. And I mean, a lot of that gets glossed over, but it's a huge problem. I just had a great conversation with Douglas Wilson, the author, on that subject, and I'm going to be putting that up very shortly on Locals. So if you want to see my conversation with Douglas Wilson, go become a member at Locals, chuckholton.com. If you go to chuckholton.com, that'll take you to Locals. That's also the same company that owns Rumble, so don't freak out if you see Rumble in there. And if you become a paying supporter, you get lots of extra content, articles, summaries of each of these lives. You get extra videos we put up. I have a whole documentary I did on jihadist infiltration into France that I'm going to put up today. And so if you're a supporter over there, you can get access to all that stuff. And look, that's the best way to say, hey, Chuck, we like what you do and we want to see more of it. Because then I don't have to worry about YouTube kicking me off the platform because I said the wrong thing someday. Cheryl Miller says, with so many governors vowing to back Mamdani's fight with President Trump, isn't this a huge step towards civil war? Civil War II is not going to look like Civil War I. There's not going to be armies forming up and, taking up battle lines and having a battle at Appomattox or someplace like that. You're not going to see a Gettysburg type battle in America. The second Civil War is going to look more like Black Lives Matter riots and Antifa riots all across the country. And there's a great article on this subject I keep pointing out to you. It's called When the Music Stops, America's Cities Will Explode in Violence by Matthew Bracken, Bracken, former Navy SEAL, historian, and a very, very good writer. I don't agree with everything he says, but he wrote this book, or not book, that article in like 2002, and he was right on the money. So go check it out. KP1 says, do you think people as a whole depend too much on Trump overtaking personal responsibility for their own lives? Perhaps. Perhaps they do. We should not make Trump into a cult of personality. I think in many ways he already is. And I refuse to subscribe to the Trump of personality that is, to the cult of personality that is Donald Trump. I support him when he does something that's good, and I criticize him when he does something that's bad. And that's the way we should hold all of our politicians to account. So if he says something stupid, we should say it's stupid. And don't be afraid. Every time I do, I lose subscribers, and that's okay. Because I'm going to stay true to my worldview. And if Trump lines up with that, great. If he doesn't, that's on him. Brenda Pfeiffer says, how many years have you been doing this? 23 years-ish. I've been a war correspondent. Thank you, William Woodard. Rangers lead the way. I appreciate that, $49.99. That's very kind of you. And look, for all the whack jobs and haters that come do drive-by comments, the vast majority of the comments we get on my YouTube channel are extremely edifying and encouraging. And I'm so grateful to all of you for that, because you can imagine how just depressing it is to go through a bunch of comments where people are saying stupid, angry, bitter, critical things. And I've got a pretty thick skin because I've been doing this a long time. And the one thing I do is I'll go through those comments and I'll delete the comments that I think are pushing propaganda that I'm like, that's absolute propaganda. So if you're pushing stuff like Zelensky's a crook and he's stealing all the money and buying himself villas in Europe, yeah, I'm going to delete that comment because that's untrue, number one, stupid, number two, and 100% Russian propaganda, number three. And I don't want to give my platform to Russian propaganda. So if you're spouting Russian propaganda on my platform, I'm going to delete it. But other than that, criticize away. I don't care. Buddy Martin says, do you think the filibuster's over? Either it will be when Republicans are in power or Democrats in power. If Republicans end it, they can change election law. Yeah, so I've talked about that already. I think the Republicans ought to go ahead and do it. I hate that, but they should. How do you think the Jews will be treated in New York? Probably about as bad as they've been treated lately. I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. Cheryl Miller says, don't you think that taking a stand for righteousness will bring... You know what's amazing is how many Jews in New York voted for Mamdani. That's about the most self-destructive, stupid thing I've ever seen. But there are people who are Jewish. There are lots of people in New York who are Jewish, but they are liberal this much and Jewish this much. Jewish is what they were born. They might be culturally Jewish, but they're far more wedded to their liberal ideology than they are to their Jewish, history. And that's unfortunate. Cheryl says, don't you think that taking a stand for righteousness will bring them more blessings than their pensions, though? New York police quitting. God provides for the birds, and what more will he give us? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you should always make decisions based on what's moral first and what's expedient second. No question. Sharon Whitley says, why did churches abdicate taking care of those in need to the government? I think the government actually stole that ability from the churches, and the churches just let it happen. It's basically, we haven't gone out and voted for people that would run the government in the way the government ought to be run. And so there's that. That's a multi-generational thing. It's not any one generation that did that. Okay. But we can take it back. We can take it back. Connie's Norwegian ancestry. She hates winter. Yes, she's seen all the winter she needs to see for the rest of her life. And she's a freeze cat. She's cold if it gets below 70 here in Panama. She's like, I've never been so cold in my whole life. You're like, oh, give me a break. Sunday River says, do you think that it's become apparent that Islam believers are consumed by a reprobate mind, hence the reason that they can't see truth? And how do you deal with a reprobate mind? You deal with reprobate mind by standing up for the truth. You are not in control, and you don't have to worry about being in control of changing people's minds. You just have to live for truth with a capital T. That is the Most High God. And we are called to be obedient. We're not called to win. We're not called to go out and fight. We're called to be obedient. And if I'm grateful to Christ for what he did for me on the cross, then I will be obedient out of a sense of gratitude. And then we can trust God to take care of the rest. And that doesn't mean that everything's going to be hunky-dory, that things aren't going to continue to go from bad to worse. The Bible is pretty clear on that. The book I just finished writing, which is called Red Teams, talks about this at length. So, it is what it is. But if we're obedient, then we don't have to worry about anything else. Novak Custom Harvesting says, do you think the new mayor of New York will turn New York into one giant Muslim city? No, not necessarily, but he's certainly not going to. He's certainly going to give some preference, probably, to Muslims, and likely more Muslims will move to New York City because he's there. Earl Gray said, didn't Eric Adams was receiving money from Turkey? I'm sure it happens a lot with politicians. Yeah, it does happen a lot with politicians, and it's pretty easy for them to hide it. So a lot of politicians are getting money from foreign countries, and we need to fix that system. We have a very, very broken electoral system. Cheryl Miller says, do you think that many governors have already declared this new type of civil war? Yeah, you're seeing that like in California, where they're saying, all right, we're just going to redraw the districts in our state to get more Democrats in power. That is a soft form of civil war against the rest of the country. Chuck, do you believe we're in the end times? Well, we're a day closer to the end times today than we were yesterday. And I'll just leave it at that. All right. Well, God bless you all. Thank you very much for watching the podcast. We're well over an hour now, so I'm going to leave it at that. I appreciate all of you. Again, just ask you to do me a favor and go to chuckholton.com and become a supporter over there. Also, I just want to say thank you to all of you who went yesterday to support my son Mason's new YouTube channel. My son started a readiness channel called Third Monkey Ready on YouTube. You can see it, the at down there in the, as a matter of fact, let's maybe take that off and just make it, instead of a ticker, we'll put it up like that. Almost 500 of you, almost 400 of you went over yesterday and subscribed to his channel. And that just made his month. He told me yesterday, his goal was to have 100 subscribers by the end of the year. And now he's closing in on 500. And that's awesome. And, his videos are very timely. They're very well put together. He's put a lot of work into them. So thank you to all of you who went over and subscribed to Mason's channel here on YouTube. Third Monkey Ready. Check it out. Very entertaining as well. All right. That's all I've got. God bless you. We'll see you again next time.